Hi y'all, it's Laura. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My dogs always want to make an appearance in the beginning of my videos apparently. My name is Laura and I am the owner of Eddy Photography. I am a wedding and portrait photographer located right now in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And today I'm going to be talking about all about the lenses that I use on a wedding day and what I use each one for. So should we get started, Rocky? I think we should. The first lens I want to talk about is my Canon 50mm 1.2 lens. I use this lens the most out of any of the lenses that I have, and the main reason for that is because I also shoot on a medium format film camera. On that camera I have my 80mm lens, and so on digital my 50mm is just the most similar to it. So when I'm trying to match my film and my digital, usually the 50mm does the best job like resembling it. So that's why I mainly use this the most. On a wedding day, the main events that I use my 50mm for would be the couple portraits and anything sort of portraits like that of the couple, or like the wedding party, and then even family formals I use the 50mm for, and then also for detail shots of like invitation suites and of the tables, any decorations, I typically use my 50mm. So it stays on my camera a good majority of the day. I love having my aperture wide open all the way to 1.2 even sometimes, but I typically stay around 1.8 to 2.8 when I'm photographing with it. A 50mm lens is always a great start for really any type of photography. So if you don't even have a lens yet, definitely check out a 50mm. They even have one called the Nifty 50, which it's like $100. It's super inexpensive. I believe it goes down to 1.8, and so you can just find that on Amazon. I will link this and the other 50mm that I just talked about in the links below. Okay, so continuing right along, my next lens that I want to talk about is my Canon 70-200 f2.8 lens. This is the big boy. This is the one, this is the heavy duty one, I'll tell you that. My arms definitely get tired after holding this one on my camera for a while, but it's so worth it. I don't use this lens as often as my 50mm, but I do think that it's essential, at least for me, on a wedding day. I use it mostly during the ceremony and then during the reception for special events like the first dance or speeches. I love the range that I get with a 70-200. I can get, you know, wider portrait type of shots during those events, but then I can also zoom up really, really close and get just those details that you can't get with a wider lens. So one of the pictures that I always like to get for my couples is just their hands when they're putting the rings on during the ceremony. And for me personally, I don't want to go like right up to the front with like a 50mm lens or like a 35mm lens and put, you know, have the camera right in their face during the ceremony. So for me, the 70-200 is like my favorite lens for that purpose because I can make it look like I'm right there. I can get really close up onto their faces, onto their reactions, onto their hands, onto all the little details, but I don't have to be distracting people during the ceremony. And then same thing for the reception. I can go all the way around the room just by like turning in a circle and get really close up into all of the details, all of the emotions, and any little thing that's going on like that. So that's why I love my 70-200. My second to last lens is my Canon 100mm 2.8 macro lens. I know a lot of people who use macro rings or like extension tubes to get macro shots, and I actually used them up until I got this lens just a few months ago, and it works so great. You can get like a 4-pack of the extension tubes for like $25 on Amazon, so I can even link that below. But I really do love my 100mm macro lens now. I love it for two reasons. The first reason is obviously so I can take macro shots. I do a lot of detail photos in my wedding photography, like the ones here on the screen, and so for me, just being able to pop on a lens and not have to worry about screwing on a tube and having to stay at like a certain focal point, I have a lot more freedom with this lens to frame my pictures exactly how I want. So that's definitely my favorite use for this lens, obviously. And then my second favorite use for it is actually just because it's 100mm. I really love the compression that this lens gives, and if you don't know what compression is, it's basically the longer the lens is, it kind of like smushes the background and the foreground together, so it kind of makes it look more flat, I guess. It gives it more of bokeh around the sides, like a blurriness. That's super layman's terms for explaining what compression is. It's a lot more technical than that I don't even know how to explain it. But I really love the look of that. Sometimes, especially if we're in like a really big area or like a field or in an alleyway, I'll pop on the 100mm and get a really, really nice look. Really beautiful blurry backgrounds and beautiful compression. And it's just very flattering for portraits. So that's my second favorite reason that I have this lens. And then last but not least, I have a Sigma Art 35mm 1.2. I actually don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it's a 35mm lens. This is a lens that I actually used to use the most frequent because it was the first lens that I got, but now that I have my other lenses and that I've transitioned over into shooting more film, I actually use my 35mm the least often. But I'm definitely going to keep it around because sometimes shooting with like the 50mm, 100mm, 70 to 200, those are definitely a bit more you know, closer lenses. And so if I'm trying to get a wide shot of something, specifically the reception hall or in a getting ready room that's a lot smaller, I'm gonna need a wider lens. So I pop on my 35mm. It's beautiful. I do love the lens, but it typically doesn't flow as well in my galleries. And then another time I would pull out my 35mm are for large family portraits, especially again, if we're in a smaller room, we have a lot of people, I'm definitely gonna need to bring out my 35mm. So that's all of the lenses that I have. If I had to recommend one or two lenses, I would say first the 50mm because you can still get really wide shots, but sometimes it's just a little bit too close. And then for a second lens, I would say either go with like an 85mm, which hopefully that's gonna be the next one I add to my collection, or a 35mm, because the 50mm can kind of, you know, go both ways, wide and close up for more like portraiture and stuff like that. And so then you could get an 85 to get even more compression, more depth in the background, more portraiture work, or I would say go for the 35 if you're doing more landscape work, if you're working with big groups and wider shots like that. But that would be my recommendation for one or two lenses to get started. And I really hope this video helped you guys. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or want any more recommendations or insight into the lenses. I know this was a super quick video, but that's why I want you to comment below so I can keep this conversation going with you and hopefully help you out even more. And also head over to my Instagram, that's where I'm the most active. I'd love to connect with you. And if you'd like to chat about a session for yourself, you can head over to my website and fill out my contact form. Thank you again so much for watching, and we'll chat soon. Bye!